Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. Wait for everyone just to come on in and then we'll get started in just a couple of seconds. Thank you for joining the program this evening. This is the final session of our storytelling program, which we've done, I believe, 5 sessions of through the course of the spring. And it's really going to be wonderful to be able to hear a little bit about Randall's story. And I'd like to thank Jesse Tepperman for interviewing Randall Craig and for guiding the conversation this evening. As we gather together for stories, I think it's very important for us to reflect upon the ongoing story of our Jewish people that is being reflected on the battlefields and in the air above the state of Israel as we speak. And to be very much on our minds, the experience of our brothers and sisters who are facing a very difficult evening and a very difficult number of days. And as we enter into this program of storytelling, to be very much aware of their stories and our connection to those stories as well. So I ask that everyone just take a moment of quiet prayer before we begin our evening to dive in and to think about God's protection of our brothers and sisters. With that, I'm going to turn the floor over now to Robin to introduce our speakers and to introduce our program.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the last of our series for the year. The storytelling project has been an incredible opportunity for us to get to know people in our community, and we're really excited to hear from Randall Craig this evening, to hear his story, and to hear him interviewed by a wonderful member of our shul, Jesse Tepperman, who is an entertainment lawyer who currently works as the Director of Business and Legal Affairs at Boat Rocker Media, a global entertainment company that specializes in producing content for all platforms. A graduate of Windsor Law's dual JD MBA program, Jesse practiced corporate law prior to pursuing his passion in entertainment. It's not a coincidence that we invited Jesse to interview Randall this evening. Jesse, along with his wife Alexa and their 2 sons, Billy and Dean, are proud members of Shari Shemaim. Before I turn the floor over to Jesse and to Randall, I just want to say to everyone on this call, every member of our community, if you have a story to tell, please reach out to me, to anybody that you know in the shul. The idea is to continue to tell stories next year, and we would love to hear your story if you have one. If you have an idea of someone else's story, please let us know. And if you're interested in joining our planning committee, please reach out. You're welcome to join us. The more people, the more creativity. And finally, I just want to thank the committee who's worked so hard to put this program together for all of us. Randall and Linda Craig, Jesse Tepperman, Brian Lass, Donna Starkman-Schiff, Zahava Stadler, Rachel Libman, Nicole Toledano, Rabbi Strockler, Rabbi Diamond, and Michelle Diamond. Thank you all for working so hard on behalf of our shul. Enjoy the evening.
Thank you so much, Robin, for that introduction. It's an honor to be here tonight and to be introducing Randall Craig. So without further ado, Randall Craig is an internet pioneer who led the digital strategies for several major market newspapers, consulting firms, and financial institutions since 1994. He has helped over 100 organizations rethink their approach at the intersection of marketing and technology and land their digital strategy airplane. Randall has founded several successful startups. He's held a longtime position at a Big 4 consulting firm and was a senior executive at an American public company. Randall is currently the CEO and chief strategist of digital consulting firm Pine Tree Advisors and advises leaders on digital strategy, trust, and transformation. Randall is also the author of 8 books, including Digital Transformation for Associations, The Everything Guide to Starting an Online Business, the Online PR and Social Media series, and the bestseller Personal Balance Sheet. He has taught numerous executive education programs, hosts professional speaking engagements, and frequently appears as an expert in the media. He's also written hundreds of articles, and he's delivered thousands of presentations, both in person and virtual. In addition to his, Randall has served as the board at the board level for several national organizations, is a member of the Global Speakers Federation, and has also earned an FCMC, a CFA, MBA, CSP, and I just found this out very recently, but a black belt in karate. Randall, you didn't tell me that, but that was, I did my own little research there. In addition to his outstanding professional achievements, he's held numerous board and community leadership roles over the years, most recently as Shari Shemaim's president. He's married to his wife, Linda, and has 3 grown children. And perhaps one of the most interesting things Randall has done in his lifetime, and what we will also be discussing this evening, is his experience writing and composing the musical Esther, a musical that he wrote while being treated for leukemia. And in addition to putting this together, he's also in the process of putting together a global virtual choir based on the music, and hopefully we'll hear more of that this evening, and we're very excited about it. So, Randall, it's an absolute honor. I want to start, I know I gave a pretty thorough introduction of your career, but I think it's important for us to get some context. So many would refer to you as a serial entrepreneur. So can you just give us a brief background on your career history, specifically your interest in digital strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I went out of the chute from IB Business School and got a job doing mergers and acquisitions, and quickly discovered I really enjoyed marketing strategy. Ended up at KPMG, where I was for a number of years in doing marketing consulting, and eventually decided to leave there when the internet sort of hit. I realized that this was a huge game changer for the world, and after helping KPMG figure that one out, I went on to do the same thing for Torstar, for Globe and Mail, Globe Investor, Globe Fund, Workopolis. Those were all my ideas, and a whole bunch of other ones since. So once you've got the bug, you could see really the possibilities, and that's really where that came from. Eventually, I started my own company, sold it, was a senior executive at American Public Company. Eventually left there, started another, built it, sold it, and so on. So that was my last company. We had 25 full-time people. I was going 16 hours a day. It was just absolutely thrilling for me until I sort of got the call.
And we'll dive into that a little bit in a little bit. One of the things that you and I spoke about before this event was your experience as a writer. And you've written 8 books, which is amazing. And I don't want to, I want for you to give some background a little bit on sort of how you got into writing, but also of all the books you've written, which one was your favorite to write, and why would you say it's your favorite? Because I know all of them are different in many ways, and they all sort of have, sort of a specific theme to them.
That's a good question. And I think that if you ever asked any author, and it was the same thing with me, somebody said, wow, that's a great book. And I'm thinking of one of them, Personal Balance Sheet, a Practical Career Planning Guide, and my first one, Leaving the Mothership. Somebody said to me, well, how long did it take you to write that book? The answer is, X number of months, or, a year or something like that. But the truth is that it took me a lifetime. And pretty much every author feels the same way, that, perhaps if you've got something to say, it takes a while for it to coalesce and then to codify it in a way. And in my particular case, I'd never written a book before. And to be able to try my hand at that and express myself in a longer form in a way that might be able to help others, for me, was very, very satisfying. And I think every book, which has a slightly different topic, really did that same thing for me. It's a neat way to get some ideas out there and to see some light bulbs go on, and that gave me a lot of personal satisfaction.
Do you see yourself writing more books, or is this sort of being put on pause as you venture into your Broadway career?
After a certain number of books, you start to say, well, gee, is this the only way? And the reason why is that, each of us, when we decide to learn something, who's to say what's the best form for learning it? For some people, it's reading a book, long form. Other people, they want something shorter, maybe a white paper, or maybe, a blog post, or maybe a tweet. Other people prefer it in video, or podcasts, audio. And so, if part of my mission is to get ideas out there and to make a difference with them, I can't always be assuming that only one mechanism is the way to actually do so. So maybe I'll write another book or two. I've got enough content for it, but there's only so many ergs of energy that are available. So where do you actually put them?
Yeah, no, for sure. And also, as we'll discuss in a little bit, I think you've got your hands pretty full with a musical that hopefully I can acquire the rights to and exploit in all forms of IP, as they say. But I've always enjoyed public speaking, and we talked about that as well. Sort of, I've had many opportunities in my career to engage in public speaking, and I find it enjoyable, and I know you do as well. But one of the things you spoke about was sort of getting a professional designation as a public speaker, which I actually didn't even know existed. And just given your background, I sort of would be interested to hear about your certified speaking professional designations, sort of, I think they call it CSP, sort of what is this? And then why did you become a professional speaker, and how have you utilized that designation, not only in your career, but also personally and, in your community involvement as well?
So I guess, boy, that's like around 8 questions packed into one.
I apologize. I know.
It's okay. I know you're a lawyer. What can I say?
Yeah.
Can I answer? Well, yes. And then that covers them all. First of all, you realize that unless your name is, I don't know, Bill Clinton or Stephen King, you don't actually get rich or actually make really much money at all from a traditionally published book. And so, when people started to knock on my door and say, can you please speak about the topic that you write? Obviously, you're an expert on it. I thought, well, yeah, of course I will. And probably like any senior executive, actually anybody who's got some comfort speaking in front of other people, it's a pleasant thing to do. You can share your ideas. I think there's a difference, though, between somebody who does public speaking and somebody who's a professional speaker. So in my particular case, I've got a very deep knowledge, for example, in digital strategy. But guess what? I've also spent years and years and years building a skill in communicating ideas that will stick with people in my audience. And I think that's the big difference between the two of them, that as a professional speaker, people write a decent check. And as a result of that, they've got expectations. So in Canada, there's 61 people, that's it, who've got this CSP designation. Less than 10% of the people in the world who are professional speakers have got it. And there's a huge amount of evaluation, and there's a huge amount of experience and review and clients and the number of things that you've got to do. And a number of years ago, I sort of passed that mark. So that's something I'm proud of. But the designation doesn't get you anything. It's your ideas and your ability to communicate them with an audience that will actually make a difference.
Thank you. That's a great answer. I want to shift the tone a little bit, and unfortunately, talk about a time in your life that was a little bit dark, and one of the things we spoke about, when we had our conversation before this event, was we do share an interesting bond, and unfortunately, that bond has been created by our own personal and collective struggles with cancer. For those of you who are not aware, my mom passed away a few years ago from a very rare form of cancer. And I became very educated on the topic and continue to educate myself on cancer. And I know you also, having a rare diagnosis and, understanding all the intricacies involved with having cancer, you've developed a very unique approach to your diagnosis. So without getting into the details of the diagnosis specifically, I just want to really, go back to the day where everything changed in your life and where you received your diagnosis. Because I think experiencing that moment, whether you're the person getting the diagnosis or the person who is experiencing watching the person get that diagnosis, it's very challenging. So I just wanted, maybe for you to recall that moment and what that felt like.
Yeah. Listen, I'm a very matter-of-fact kind of person. Give me the facts. I can figure out how I can react to them. In my particular case, I wasn't feeling the greatest. I went to the doctor and basically said, "Hey, antibiotics, bring them on." They said, "No, blood test first. If it's a bacteria, you get antibiotics. If it's not, we'll have to deal with something." And then getting the call from them. The short version of it is, "You've got leukemia." Oh, isn't that nice? And I knew that was not one of the good cancers. It turns out I had one, the kind where it was particularly bad. It was even growing out of my skin, if you could believe. And so luckily I was able to get myself into Princess Margaret. Okay, busy taking it down, letting my wife Linda know and everything. And of course she was there. And within a day I was getting treatment, or rather waiting to get treatment in the hospital. And as far as I was concerned, okay, this is the situation I'm in. There's nothing I can do about it. So let me just dig in and we'll see what happens. And I knew from the research that the prognosis for leukemia was not very good. But you're in the boat, and the boat looks like it's sinking. So you want to make use of all of your time and just keep a decent attitude. It's not a good treatment. Okay, it's very, very difficult. And I'll just sort of go on for a little bit. I remember I was in the hospital and I was like semi out of my mind, I guess. And I'm calling a couple of my closest friends, and my wife Linda, who was there throughout the whole time with me, is sitting there steaming away, and she doesn't usually steam. I'm telling this friend and that friend, I've got leukemia, I've got cancer, blah blah blah, I said to Linda, what's up? What's wrong? She says, "Randall, you don't have leukemia. We have leukemia." And at that point, I realized that particularly when you've got a bad diagnosis of any kind, it's not really just you who's going through it. It's really everybody. And I'll give a hat tip to Rabbi Strauch, who was very helpful during it. He gave me a piece of advice that I thought was actually really, really helpful. He says, everybody around you needs something to do. They need to feel useful. They need to feel part of the solution. So don't feel that you've got to take it all on yourself. But, when people ask for help, give them the opportunity to be useful and to help. And that helped with my family, and certainly with my friends and the wider community as well.
For sure. I think we're going to touch a little bit on the community support in a bit, but one of the things you spoke to me was about your attitude and embracing this with such a positive attitude, and how that kept you strong during this life-altering experience. How did you develop that mindset? And because going through it myself, I didn't get the diagnosis, but I know I can relate and say when my mom was diagnosed, I just felt at the time like accepting defeat, and it took me a while to get to where you were right at the beginning. So I think it's so inspiring, and I'd love to know how you developed that mindset.
Well, I have to tell you that there was several hours between the time that I got the diagnosis, sitting at my desk right where I am right now, and the time that I was in the car going down. And I thought to myself, since a good friend of mine, Dr. Sandy Finkelstein, said, "Randall, pack a bag, you're going to be there for a couple of days." Little did I realize that it really was like 7 months. And I thought to myself, well, something, if I'm going to be in the hospital all that time, I'll bring my computer. And, I'm a big fan of James Bond, and I'm a big fan of Star Trek. This will be a great opportunity for me to watch every single James Bond, one after another. You've never watched every single Star Trek episode and every single movie from beginning to end. What an interesting opportunity. So, I packed all those DVDs or whatever, all those files in my, computer bag and my overnight bag and everything. And I thought, okay, this is a great opportunity to do that. And, what are you going to do? You get a bad diagnosis, or, you stub your toe, it doesn't matter. You got to deal with it. And probably one of the more difficult things about being in the hospital, especially for so long, was just all the crying and the yelling and the pain that you hear out in the hallway. And I would never minimize how other people would react and deal with terrible news and everything. But for me, it really wasn't that. I just felt that, okay, fine. Now that I'm here, this is what I'm going to do. And so I did it. I just reacted to the situation. And I did watch every James Bond, and I did watch every Star Trek, etc. And for the first several months of the cycles of chemo and everything, and it was terrible. I was in ICU. It was like really bad, and it was very touch and go. And it was like, okay, what are we going to do today? I couldn't read much. My attention span, it was in pretty bad shape. But you can control what you can control, and when you've got agency, that gives you a lot of confidence and it gives you a lot of strength. And once again, my family was very supportive. The community too. But and I didn't feel like I had to be strong for them. I didn't even think, well, I'm going to be strong now. It's just like, okay, I'm just going to get on with it. And so I did.
Yeah. Well, and I think those words are so relatable right now, especially. And we talked about this, developing this unique mindset while you're in isolation. And, obviously there is a difference between, having a rare form of cancer and, living in a global pandemic, but there are overlapping similarities in the sense that there's this isolation and fear. And right now, especially where we are, there's a lot of stress. And I think mental health is at an all-time low. So, it really resonates with me, and I'm sure resonates with all of our viewers right now, like how you were able to remain positive and keep yourself occupied during isolation. And before we get into Esther, because that is sort of the cornerstone of your journey, I think, at least in my opinion, I want to talk briefly about the bone marrow match, because you are going through treatment, you are working with your doctors, I'm sure your family and your doctors, and you are meeting regularly to discuss treatment options. And at the end of the day, you realize and you're told that, basically your last opportunity to get this to work is to find a bone marrow match. So the story is just it's so inspiring and so interesting. So I was hoping you can give us some background on how the match process happened and the aftermath of receiving the match.
So I'll have to take a step back though, Jesse, if I could. And after several rounds of chemo, this is 2 months, the doctors basically came and said, I'm very sorry, Mr. Craig. This is it. We're going to stop the chemo. It's not doing any good. Okay. You're done. Okay. There's no chance of survival, except if we could find a perfect bone marrow match. And there wasn't one in my family, by the way. So it would have to be somewhere else. And gee, something, if you do get it, there's only a 50% chance of living for 2 years. And gee, if you live to 2 years, only 50% chance of living to 5 years. I'm at 3.5 years, by the way, right now, and feeling quite good and very thankful to be
God.
here. And so fine, okay, let's just hope. And there's a global bone marrow database that's federated by country, and there's nobody in Canada. And it turns out there is nobody in the United States, but there's only one person in some other part of the world. I didn't know, man, woman, okay, old, young, who was actually a perfect match. And much like adoptions, you can't actually just find out who they are. After a year, and some countries it's 2 years, you can fill out a whole bunch of paperwork and say, I'd like to learn. And if the other party says the same thing as well, then they'll actually tell you who it is. Turns out that the one person who was a perfect match in the world was a 23-year-old former paratrooper in southern Israel who's a full-time rabbinical student. It was just unbelievable. And I found this out, and obviously we wrote a letter back and forth, and my Hebrew is not very good, and his English was not very good, but we sort of got into it. Ezer Mitzion is the Israeli bone marrow registry, and they made a deal actually that everybody going to the army would get swabbed. So little country Israel that has got a very small number of people. We might think of their exports as being agriculture or high tech, etc. But interestingly, bone marrow and stem cells, particularly, is actually a huge export to people from all over the world, every single religion. So Ezer Mitzion called me up and said, by the way, would you be willing to speak at an event? Are you comfortable speaking publicly? And I said, well, yeah, I'm a professional speaker. What have you got in mind? Well, we'd like to fly over your donor and his wife and their 1-month-old infant. They've never been on a plane before. We'd like to invite you to an event, and you speak. And after you speak and tell your story, they're going to come out and you're going to meet them in person. And that was an unbelievable highlight. Just they're the nicest couple, nicest people. We spent a day with them. We took them to Niagara Falls. What else are you going to do? They marveled at all of our water in Canada, unbelievable. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. Of course, we're still in touch. But this just actually goes to show you about, a type of ingenuity and a type of far thinking, that's typical of Israel, that the world and me specifically were very, very fortunate. He wasn't around, or if his parents weren't around, he wouldn't have existed. And I don't know what would have happened to me. Actually, I do. Okay, which is why I'm so thankful. So that's the story of my donor. And boy, what a surprise. What a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, it's a very just touching, moving story. And the work that Ezer Mitzion does is amazing. I did some more research on the organization after we spoke, and it's just pretty amazing what they do. And it's just, wow, what a beautiful story. So we're going to get into Esther the musical because I'm a big fan, and I very much enjoyed listening to the music. And before we jump into that, I want to give a little sneak peek to our audience. I think it's nice to integrate some entertainment value into our shul presentation. So I thought it'd be nice for the audience to get a sneak peek at a pivotal track from the project. We're going to listen to a song called Corner Block. I was hoping you could just give us some background on the song and what it means to you as a writer and a composer.
So yes, you're going to listen to Corner Block. Corner Block is a story of Esther before the story, and it's meant to sort of expose Esther's background, if you will. And I should say that my version of Esther takes place today. In a corporate paradigm, Esther is a VP, or she will become a VP. Chesh Varosh, I had to change the name. It doesn't really rhyme with much in English, so it became Mr. Various. It deals with issues like Black Lives Matter or Me Too, or a whole bunch of other modern themes, etc. So Corner Block, and we're going to listen to it right now, is that intro song before the main play itself. And you get a sense as to the challenges that Esther and people like Esther actually feel. Should we let her rip?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
So you're looking at a fellow who's conducting it. Okay, we're going to be having a global choir. I'll talk more about that. And part of that is to actually provide music for singers to sing along with and to record themselves. So I figured rather than just giving you the audio, you get to watch a conductor conduct it at the same time. Okay, here we go.
3 and What do I see? Bop. Do-do-do. Ba da da da. What do I see? Bop. Do-do-do. Do-do-do. My corner block, the one I know. The people I love, the people I know. What do I see? What do I see? What do I see? What do I see? Good thinking, good beliefs, but limited by what people see. We may be different, there's nothing wrong, but no privilege, we scrape along. What do I see? We don't want to get along, no jobs mean no more hope. No justice means no confidence, we're strong so we just go. What do I see? My corner block, the one I know, the people I love, the people I know. What can I do? I'm just one person, the system's broke, I'm so uncertain. What do I see? You're just one person, yet strength within you. You've got what it takes, your future you'll work through. I'll find a way to bring you in to where I work a good position. If I had power, I'm just one person to fix the system, a heavy burden. What do I see? What do I see? What do I see? Ooh, yes, exploitation. Oh no, emancipation. Ooh, yes, separation. Oh no, participation. Ooh, yes, resignation. Oh no, determination. Ooh, yes, incarceration. Oh no, liberation. For me, what do I see? I see just one person. What do I see? We're different, we're strong. A change you'll see. A change you'll see. A change you'll see.
Wow. Fantastic. I love it. It's better the second time, I'm telling you. And I'm just a little upset because I'm waiting for my solo, but we can deal with that offline. But okay, so let's talk about Esther, because it's just so interesting and such a just crazy thing, because the last thing you're sitting in a hospital room with essentially nothing to do. You're isolated, and your first thought is, why don't I create a Broadway musical? Which is not, a conventional thought that comes into one's head when they're lying in an ICU. So how did that come about? And then, why Esther? Because what?
So let me take the questions. Let me take them one at a time.
Yeah.
I wasn't actually just sort of sitting around. Honestly, when you're doing this leukemia and transplant thing, you're not sitting around. You're lying. Okay. And it was the point where the doc said, that's it, except for if you magically could get this bone marrow transplant, and then you're up at 50%, not 0% survival. And I thought, oh, this is amazing. This is great. Everyone else is looking at me very direly and dourly. But I also was told, listen, you're going to have to go into semi-isolation afterwards, because infection risk is actually something quite serious for somebody with like no immune system. And so Linda or somebody said, well, what do you think you're going to do during that time? And I said, well, why don't I write a Broadway musical? Then I thought, holy crap, what did I just say? But, once you say it, then the idea sticks. And I've always loved the story of Esther. I loved it because there's intrigue, there's good guys and bad guys, there's all kinds of lessons, there's all kinds of hidden things. Unlike Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, which became a Broadway musical, and a whole bunch of other ones that took Jewish themes or stories, etc. I felt that Esther as a story was almost relegated to the humor and the parody of Purim spiels. And I think that the actual underlying message of Esther itself was really, really important for today. And at the very beginning, I thought, okay, I'm going to do it, but do I do it in a like a Ben-Hur kind of historical way, or in a cartoony kind of way, or do I bring it to a certain era, for example, the 1920s or 40s, or today, etc. And so I started to read a lot of books from Torah scholars, from secular scholars, from all kinds of commentators, thousands and thousands of pages on Esther. And obviously there's a lot of depth in there. And I thought to myself, that this was definitely a story worth telling, and probably the best way to make it relatable to the greatest number of people is to put it in a paradigm that frankly most people would understand. Somebody, for example, who does not have any privilege, who finds herself in a position of authority, yet the bad guy, Haman or Ham in this story, I changed the name, to a nice unkosher name, Ham, scheming away, and she's got to decide, does she have it in it? Does she have it in herself to step up and speak out for those who are like her, those who are different, those who believe differently? And meanwhile, there's all these themes like Me Too. Okay, finally, that sort of got some airtime, but it was kind of like the issue over there. As soon as something else came, I thought that needed more airtime, and I was always bothered by the whole question of racism, whether it be for against Jews or against people of color or any particular minority on any dimension. And when Black Lives Matter came out, guess what? I'm in the middle of writing this thing, and I thought, gee, is that not the same story? So this isn't the story of Black Lives Matter. It's not the story of Me Too or global nationalism or aka Trump, etc. No. This is the story of Esther, and Esther and the story's got lessons to teach today, if only we had it in a form that we might listen to. And so like I said, I read thousands of pages of books on it. It was fascinating. Okay, some of them were very difficult to get through, but I did, and I've got the notes to show it and the bruises to show it. I've always done improvisational piano, so guess what? This is a question, maybe can I songify them? I wasn't afraid of writing long form things just because of all my other books. So guess what? I needed something to do. And when I was sort of in that hospital bed, my best friend said, well, how can I help? And I said, well, get me a piano in here. And, I was a little bit uncertain. When you're in one of these hospital like isolation rooms, it's like a bubble boy. You can't really go much out and everything, and you don't want to disturb anybody. But heck, I played anyway, and I played for 2 or 3 hours, and that's where a lot of the themes, the musical themes, and came about, and that's where a lot of the thinking about the adaptation of the story came about there. And it's kind of funny. On some days, I just didn't feel like playing. I was just feeling so bad. And what would happen is the nurses would come by and say, all the other patients really like the piano playing. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm not doing it for them. It was just a way to keep my mind on stuff other than, what's happening to your body during chemo and radiation and transplant and all those kinds of things. So, I had the piano in there for after the first week or so, I had it in there for the entire time. And it was just absolutely wonderful, because it got your mind off stuff, but also gave me purpose. And, you can only watch so many Star Trek or James Bond movies, right? And, but sitting in front of a keyboard I could do that for hours. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
And that keyboard, because that's also critical to understanding how this show came together. Can you explain the process of how you've put the music together for the show? Because it is very different than some how things are composed, and given our current environment with people working virtually, it's also been a challenge. So for those with no music background, can you dive into the complexity of the music production?
It's actually, it's not that complex, okay? You've got a
Maybe
tune
Anthony.
in your head.
Uh-huh.
You sit down on the piano and you think, oh, what other things sound good along with it? That's called orchestration. But well before then, there's a question of this. Do you write this song and then try and fit together the story? Oh, I've got this song. Let me try and shoehorn that in to the story. Or do you start with the manuscript, the story, and say, okay, here's all the poetry, because my version of Esther, it's all in song. Here's the poetry. Now that I've got the poetry, how can I make music to pull out the emotional connection to the audience and what's underneath the particular character or characters who are actually singing it? So that's fine. I've got that. I write the music and everything. I do the orchestration, all the harmonies and the rhythm and everything. And then you say, oh boy, the words don't work very well. I need to change the words a little bit to match, right? So you change that, then you change it back and forth and you iterate. I do have to say, most people probably don't know this, but our former assistant rabbi, Jesse Shore. So the two of us would jam for a couple hours actually every week. Okay, and he loved it because it was just, he could take off his work hat and I could take off my work hat and we could jam. And so I said to him, listen, if we're doing all this jamming, what do you think about jamming to some of the songs and the progressions that we've got as part of Musical Esther? And he said, oh, that'd be a lot of fun. That'd be fun. And he's a great musician. So we spent many hours, and he was a great influence on the quality of my playing, because you got to keep up to somebody who's that good. The actual production of it, it's all done in software now. There's some software called Logic Pro, and you play on the piano, and guess what? It appears on the screen. And then what you can do is you can play that. You can get that piano to play while you're doing a bass line, and you record the bass line. Now you've got a piano, you've got a bass line. And then what you can do is you can get, say, trumpets or something like that. Use some trumpet shots, ba 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 ba, whatever you're doing. And so you start to layer these things all together. And guess what? You sort of flip something, and the software tries to make music out of it, like sheet music out of it. Of course, it makes a mess of it, so you've got to go in and fix it, and you've got to add the words and all that kind of stuff. So there is some complexity to it, but just like a writer knows many of the commands in a word processor, somebody who's doing music production and has got the ear for it, it's just a matter of understanding what the commands are. I know what harmonies and what kind of rhythmic feel I might want in a particular piece. So guess what? It's just a matter of making that happen.
Yeah. And then finding the vocalists, because I know there was, that's also been a sort of a.
So we did two things actually. Number one is this is for the Musical Esther, getting it on a stage, getting it eventually to Broadway and winning, a bunch of awards, but, having touring companies to get there, rewind back to the step one is to get it on a stage. Well, to get it on a stage, you got to pitch somebody. Well, to pitch somebody, you need a soundtrack. So a year before COVID hit, I worked with a group of very talented community singers. We did like 90 studio sessions where we recorded them. Some of them people are actually on this in the audience of this particular presentation, and that moved us very far along the way. And that's fine. And at a certain point, we're suddenly ready to do workshops so that producers and theater financiers, and there's a whole crew of people that would do it. At the end of a week of workshopping, and a workshop is they do all of the singing, and then in the afternoon and night, you change everything based on the feedback. And the next day, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. At the very end, you've got the financiers, the producers who are going to listen to it and say, yeah, I think I'd like to put this on a stage here or there or whatever. Well, it turns out that just as we're about ready to do that, this little thing called COVID hit. And that sort of did a number. But, once again, when one door closes, another door opens. And so, when we did that musical preview and all those studio sessions, that was on version 2 of the musical. And we had gotten a whole bunch more feedback from other people who are, very experienced about how to improve the script, how to make it more gritty, how to make it more realistic, etc. So we were able to move the manuscript forward like 2 major revisions, and right now we're doing the reorchestration for those for the new version of it, if you will. But at the same time, we made the decision to say, well, maybe if we can't get feedback, through a workshop process, what if we crowdsource it? What if we made a virtual choir for, say, 2 of the songs and put it out there and get all kinds of feedback from choir directors and choral experts and everything? So we'll pitch, for example, a number of choirs. We're hoping to have 50,000 people all together in it, and let the choir sing it, so long as we get a recording and some feedback back. And then we'll fit that back into the actual music itself. And by the way, who knows how successful this will be? We hope the musical Esther will be on a stage, but it's more likely to do so if we're talking to people after the formal workshops. They say, well, why should we put the musical Esther on the stage? There's lots of other, great stories to be told. Yeah, we love the music, we love the story, but why this one? And why you? And part of the answer to that is, well, it's not just me. We've got 50,000 people who are involved in our Sing with Esther virtual choir around the world. And I think they might be interested in seeing the musical that they sang the music for themselves. So, just now, actually, if you go to singwithesther.com, you can actually register. Literally today, it went live, and you can choose to sing and record yourself. Please, people with great voices, and then we'll stitch it together. And if you're part of a choir and you want your choir to sing, they could do so as well. So that's kind of where we are on that journey. I'm obviously excited about it, but it's kind of funny because everybody who sings with Esther, or the virtual choir, if anybody who actually goes to the musical Esther, the stage production, a lot of them may say to themselves, this is actually a really interesting story. Maybe I'd like to read the original. Maybe I'd like to learn a little bit more, which is actually a very cool kind of thing. But I don't know, it's a long rambling answer to your question, Jesse, but I hope it's a good one.
No, the takeaway that I have is that I can still get my solo.
That's right. That's right. Which means that if you sing, Jesse, and you're not so good, we'll still have to, put you front and center. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You can always cut me, but just let me know, please. Well, I just want to briefly mention, because we do have about 10 minutes left, and I want to give opportunity to our audience to ask some questions, and we're also going to conclude before we open the audience for questions with another song that's just very inspiring and empowering, and I want people to listen to that song. But I want to just touch briefly upon your experience as the Shul president, because I think, not only, was it I'm sure a wonderful experience for you, but I think the time that you became president was especially, especially unique. And you basically came out of isolation after a very large period of time, and you step into the role as Shul president. So what was that like for you, and why did you decide to seize that opportunity?
Listen, if somebody said to you, you only have 2 more years to live, or 5 more years to live, and you don't know, whether in fact that's going to be the case or not. Okay, maybe, just maybe, you might think, you know what, let me see how much more I can give, how much more I can contribute. Okay, and just do it. And then, for everybody, who's listening to this and says, oh, that's very good. It's I have to say, no, it's actually a great exercise, because, if you say I've only got 2 years left, okay, or I've only got 5 years left, what would I want to do? Then the real answer is, why don't you do that now? Yeah, you've got the whole rest of your life, but what's stopping you? How might I? I wrote, I found it a very satisfying role, in the sense I could see so much of how many people give. In one of the articles I wrote, it was titled, What If and How Might I? What if I wrote a musical? What if I fill in the blank for yourself, right? And as soon as you say, that's kind of interesting, and then you ask the question, well, how might I? What's stopping me? And the answer is often far less than we actually give ourselves credit for. Really, that's absolutely the truth. And from a community perspective, honestly, I felt enveloped by a loving community. We had people who would put 6 peanut butter sandwiches in our mailbox every single week to help Linda out. We had people dropping over with all kinds of stuff, and more importantly, themselves than stuff or meals, etc. But it was a very, very satisfying experience to be the Schul's leader and to be counted among so many illustrious other past presidents, and to have a chance to work with so many people who just cared so much, not just about themselves or the family, but who saw a bigger picture that they're part of, and that was very satisfying.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really speaks to me about your journey is this ability to channel your energy in such a positive way. And it's a very dark time right now for the world. I think we are heading in the right direction and there is hope, but many are feeling defeated. And I think it's okay to accept that. I think, we've taken a lot, and a lot of us want to go to shul. We want to go to kiddushes. We want to be able to daven in person, and it's been defeating. And I guess I want to know from you, and maybe you can impart some wisdom on our audience, as someone who's really just been through such a difficult time, but was able to channel your energy in such a positive way and to create from that experience. What kind of tips can you provide to our audience on, and maybe you've used.
So what I'll say, what I'll say is this, sadly, I'm not the expert on this one. Okay. I think everybody after 15 months of COVID has got as much experience as me. All I can say is that this is a real interesting opportunity to reach out to members of your family, to spend that time that perhaps in prior years or perhaps in future years we might not have had the opportunity to do so. I was on the plane all the time, speaking here, there, and everywhere. And the number of times I've had to eat dinner with my family during that time was embarrassingly low. Okay, and now I eat lunch and dinner with them almost every day. Okay, so you look for the big wins. You look for the little wins, I should say. The big wins will come along. COVID will eventually end, or at least change its form. And I just think that it's we all have experience. We can learn from each other. We can get involved in things like this particular project, and we can do things like believe in something a bit more than just ourselves. And I'm just taking a look. I've got the last song teed up.
Yeah,
do you want me to play it?
I was going to say, before you do, I just one of the key messages and thematic elements of the musical is the concept of empowerment, as you've just discussed. The final song, which you're going to play now, which I must say, it's so brilliant. It concludes the musical with a really inspiring message about hope and faith and belief. So I think this is a really good song to end with before we open up for questions, because I think it really sets the tone for what we need right now in the world.
So here we go, the finale from the musical Esther. And once again, with one of our musical team, a conductor, conducting it.
Mo has always been my mentor, my moral compass and my ethics center. He challenged me to think quite different, and who knows where I would be without him.
Esther learned from her many peers. She looked beyond their words and their ideas. She's open to the world around her. She's open to the world, a real believer.
With just a simple word we know can change it. From disaster we can win. We are believers. We are believers. believers. We are believers. We are believers. We are believers. Believers.
Esther, what do you need? I see you stand and I'm listening.
Indeed.
If half the budget and half the cash, just let me know. I'll help with that. It is my honor and pleasure that you're here without displeasure. Yes, oh yes, you have prevailed. Handship has now finally
We are believers. 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 Sometimes you find yourself in a place you don't know. Sometimes you find yourself with ideas to solve. Sometimes you find yourself and you do what you must. I've got ideas for the world to know. Believers, we are believers. We are believers. We are believers. We are believers. Sometimes I love to sing and make you laugh. I just don't sit, I think and I act. Sometimes I need some space to breathe. I've got ideas for the world to know. We are believers. 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 Domination, isolation, intimidation, subjugation.
I have been asked to be in charge here. I do my part, I'm always sincere. Why has various of discussed a key appointment? Why doesn't he give me trust?
We are believers. We are believers. We are believers. We are believers. We believe. Da 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 Believers, Gen Jet, we are believers, Gen Jet, ja believers, Gen Jet, we are believers, Gen Jet, believers, Gen Jet, we are believers, we are believers. Bop, 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 believers, Gen Jet, we are believers, Gen Jet, we are believers, Gen Jet, we are believers, we are believers, 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 bop, 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 we do believers, Gen Jet, we are believers, Gen Jet, we are believers, Gen Jet, we are believers, we are believers.
Like that.
Yes, we are believers. Yes, we are believers. Yes, we are believers. Yes, we are believers. We believe. Yes, we believe.
Amazing. Amazing.
Well, I hope you like that,
Everyone's
Jesse.
clapping. Everyone's clapping. It has a very One Day More feel for those of you who are Broadway junkies on this call. It's a beautiful song, Randall, and it's so well done and so well composed. Before we wrap this up, we have one question, I think. Yeah, we have one question. Someone wanted to know, Randall, they're curious as to how many characters other than Esther are in the musical.
Huh. So there's it's the same as the original, okay, but some people play two roles, so for example, Ham's wife, for example, also would play one of the other contestants, if you will, who's competing for the role with Esther, for example. So it requires 8 actors. There's 4 leads and at least 4 people who could be part of the chorus. It'd be great if we could have 8 or 16 in the chorus, but minimum 8.
That's great. Well, Randall, it was such an honor and such a pleasure getting to interview you and get to learn more about you. Yeah, you're a terrific person, and I really admire you and look up to you, and all your accomplishments are truly astounding. So this has been a real big treat for me. So thank you.
You're very welcome, Jesse. And you know, even though I've got some interesting things in my back pocket, I think the beauty of the Storytelling Project is to really point out that there's so many people in our community that have got so many other dimensions, and how exciting it is just to learn a little bit more about them. Let me also put a little bit of a plug. You know, if people are interested in reading a little bit more about it, if they go to www.musicalester.com, and there's all kinds of interesting blog posts and music there. Or if they go to www.singwithester.com, that's where the virtual choir is. You could hear these 2 songs, and if you have interest in singing, you could always do that too.
That's my evening plan, Randall.
Wonderful.
And now I'm gonna turn the floor to Donna, who has a few parting words.
Thank you, Jesse. Well, it's my pleasure to have been asked to thank Jesse and Randall. So I'll start with Jesse. Jesse, thank you so much for throwing yourself with your unique energy into the challenge of getting to know Randall, who, as we've learned tonight, is a very multifaceted, complex, and a seriously interesting person. Your questions created for us a heartfelt, moving, and inspirational evening. And thank you also, Jesse, for sharing with us your personal experiences as well. In addition to your participation tonight, our community is fortunate to have you as a lay leader, and your commitment and dedication to our shul is one thing among many that you share with Randall. Now, Randall, thank you for sharing with us your personal story, which is truly, truly inspirational. You not only survived a life-threatening condition, itself a major accomplishment, but you grew and flourished through it, writing a truly beautiful musical while in quarantine. I first thought to say the ICU, but actually quarantine, it resonates with all of us, I think. You set yourself a goal beyond just survival, and you succeeded. Your triumph in the face of an existential challenge is a testament to the power of the human will, but your will, and the positive effect of hope and optimism. We congratulate you, Randall, on all your strength, your resilience, and your creativity, and sincerely thank you for sharing with us your truly awesome story. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you, Donna.
Jesse, Randall, and the whole team that's put this together. It's been very, very special. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Beautifully done.
I think maybe I guess I'm the last speaker. Thank you, everybody. Randall, Jesse, everybody else. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Chag Sameach, everyone.
Chag Sameach. Well done. Yasher Koach, Jesse.
Amazing.
Randall.
Very touching.
Beautiful.
Randall.
Great job, Randall. Great job, Jesse.
Oh, I'm going to see you on Broadway. I'm waiting for Broadway. In New York and not have to quarantine when I come back.
Beautifully done. Beautifully done.
Thank you.
I sent you a message. I hope it gets through, and if it doesn't,
I got it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Be well, Randall. Was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Yasher Koach to all of you.
And thank you for so many people in our wider community who actually came to watch this presentation. And I hope that made it made your day too. Made mine for sure.
Okay, time for mincha. Be well.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Be well. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.